Hey guys, this is lesson 4, the Columbian Exchange. This is part of 1.3. Just a reminder, complete your guided notes and rewatch if necessary, or pause the video if you need to. The success criteria for today, I will be able to write about how the Columbian Exchange affected both the New World and the Old World. Okay, so the Columbian Exchange. So we've talked about Christopher Columbus coming over. He's trying to find a new route to Asia, to the Indies, and he runs into the Americas. Well, when that happens, it completely changes the course of human history. So the Columbian Exchange is named after Christopher Columbus. Once that happens, and once people in Europe know about the Americas and they start exploring it, as we've talked about and as you've looked at with the explorer you did your presentation on in lesson 3, there starts to be a movement between certain goods between the New World and the Old World. And when we talk about the Old World, we're talking about Europe and Asia and Africa. That's considered the Old World. When we talk about the New World, we're talking about the Americas. So that those terms are really from Europeans' perspective, right? The Old World to them is Europe and Asia and Africa, as you saw in the map assignment. And the New World is new to them. The Americas are new to them. Okay, so here's the definition. So the Columbian Exchange was the movement of people, goods, diseases, and culture between the New World and the Old World after Columbus. So there's many things that people in the Old World didn't know about, they didn't have in Europe, and vice versa. There were things there were people in the New World that didn't know about some things that were in the Old World, and we're going to talk about some of those things. Okay, so one thing that's really important about the Columbian Exchange, first of all, it impacted the entire world. I mean, it had an impact on Europe and the Americas, but it really had a strong impact on the Native Americans, and not necessarily in a good way. So first of all, it introduced new food and animals. So, that's good. There are things that are introduced that they didn't have, such as horses, cows, wheat, things like that they didn't have. But one of the major things that it introduced is the spread of new diseases. They were not immune to these diseases that Europeans and the animals that the Europeans brought. They were not immune to these diseases. One of the reasons why there are so many diseases in the Old World, in Europe, and not in the New World, is because they had so many domesticated animals. Remember in the video we watched, and it talked about how they have lots of domesticated animals in Europe, such as a cow, pigs, right, horses. Well, the thing with having domesticated animals and living in close quarters with them is animals spread diseases. So over time, Europeans get immune to a lot of these diseases, but when they come over to the New World, the Native Americans have never seen these diseases, and they catch these diseases and die. Many of them die. Millions of Native Americans died. Mostly from diseases, some from mistreatment and slavery and those conquistadors that we talked about, but most of it was from new diseases. Another thing is it led to a decline of freedom over time, and culture and land. Okay, here is a little map here of some of the items that were exchanged. So if you look at this map, so for example, before Columbus came to the New World, to the Americas, there were no pumpkins in Europe. So this map is showing that these pumpkins came over from the New World to Europe after the Columbian Exchange. Another example from the other direction. So honeybees came over to the New World from the Old World. In other words, before Columbus, there were no honeybees in America. So, I mean, that's pretty important because honeybees are scary and can sting you. So now we have to worry about that. Thanks, Columbus, for that. So anyway, this map shows some of the other food items and diseases that were brought over. Okay, so before Columbus, there were no rats in North America, wild horses or boars in America, apples in Washington, sugar or coffee in South America, oranges in California or Florida, potatoes in Ireland and Russia, tomatoes in Italy, and chocolate outside Mexico. So think about that, like some of these food items that are like famous to these places, they weren't there before Columbus. Okay, so let's look at some of these items here. So I want you to look at this and ask yourself the question, in 1491, so keep in mind that's before Columbus, okay, before the Columbian Exchange. If you were living in the New World or the Old World, just pick one. If you were living there in 1491, would you be able to eat a bean and cheese burrito? Delicious bean, like maybe like Taco Bell or Costa Vida. Would you be able to eat that in 1491? No, you would not. You would not be able to eat a bean and cheese burrito. If you were living in America, the New World, you would be missing the tortilla because you don't have wheat and it's made from wheat flour. You would also not have cheese because cheese comes from cows and from dairy. If you were living in the Old World in Europe, you would not have beans. So either way, you wouldn't have been able to have that before the Columbian Exchange. Okay, spaghetti. What about spaghetti? Would you have been able to eat this in 1491? If you said no, then you are correct. You would not have been able to eat this in 1491. If you were living in Europe, you would not have had tomatoes. So you wouldn't have had that delicious tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce on your spaghetti. So that's not really spaghetti. It's just noodles. You could have had noodles. And if you're living in the Americas, you wouldn't have been able to have the noodles because you wouldn't have, again, the wheat. What about this delicious hot fudge sundae? In 1491, would you have been able to have this? And of course, the answer is no, you would not. If you were living in Europe, sadly, you would not have been able to have chocolate. And if you were living in the New World in the Americas, you would not have been able to have ice cream. Like, what kind of life is that? But you wouldn't have had the dairy because you didn't have cows. What about a cheeseburger with fries? Would you have been able to have that? And of course, the answer is again no. You wouldn't have been able to have that because if you're living in the New World, in the Americas, you would not have had beef. So I guess you could have had a bun and tomatoes, and that would have been cool and probably not as delicious. But if you're living in the Old World, then you would not have had tomatoes on your hamburger. Okay, no big deal. But you would not have been able to have fries because those came from the New World to the Old World. So sad both ways. What about pizza? This is our last one. What about pizza? Would you have been able to have this? No, you would not. You would not be able to have pizza. If you're living in the Old World, you would not have had tomatoes again. How are you supposed to have pizza without tomato sauce? You can't eat pizza without sauce. That's weird. And if you're in the Americas, again, you're missing wheat. You're missing dairy for the cheese. Okay, so either way, you would not have been able to have pizza. So the Columbian Exchange had a big effect. So finally, I want you to kind of think back to this and ask yourself and be honest with yourself, can you write about how the Columbian Exchange affected both the New World and the Old World?